Ooh, that chair moved. That scared me.
Celestine, you made me think of something. So Robert and I play music in a band together, and recently I retuned my banjo to a new tuning, and it's like it's a new instrument.
Oh, wow.
Because possibilities are different. And, the idea that you take it's the same story, but you retune it to fit your likes, your needs. That's kind of a metaphorical way of saying the same thing musically. And I totally agree with you about that. It's got to be the story you love, and then it becomes yours.
Right. It's hard for me to pick a story.
Well, before you launch in, let me get you to spell your name for me so I get the spelling right.
Celestine Bloomfield. Accent on the second syllable. Celestine. Bloomfield. Bloomfield.
Accent on the second syllable. Bloomfield.
Well, I still have friends that I have not corrected who call me Celestine. And my family and other friends look at me like, you accepted that? And it's because I was tired that day of correcting people. And so I can tell you the people who call me by that. Like my father's name was Tyler Bloomfield. And you can tell who called on the phone if they asked for Tyler or if they asked for Bloomfield, And so I have one friend, Donna, who calls me Bloom. And people who I met through her, they call me Bloom. At school, most of the staff members would call me CB, so they wouldn't have to say the whole name. But, Celestine.
I think I call you CB sometimes.
Yes.
I call Ellen L.
Oh, okay.
I don't think anybody else does that.
No. Well, this is not what I thought I was doing here today. I thought I was going to be telling a story that was going to go along with some music, which is hard for me because I can either sing or I could tell the story. We did, was it the chamber orchestra series that we did, where we had to listen to music and tell a story to go along with it, and that was the hardest thing for me to do. So I can sing to you if you don't include any music, or put it over something later on. I started telling stories when I was an elementary media specialist in Gary, Indiana, at George Washington Carver Elementary School. And my library media center was up on the second floor. And my little cousins were in the 4th grade when I started teaching. And the person before me had taken all the covers off the books. So those beautiful book jackets that attract you to books were all in the back office. So in an attempt to get the kids to read books, I would start telling stories from those books. And I found out I was a good person to learn stories, because if it was St. Patrick's Day and I started reading a story to the very first class, and those were the days you had back-to-back classes, by the end of the day I could tell the story without looking at the pictures and just show the kid the pictures. That's how I got started. And one of the first books I learned stories from was from the Grandfather Tales. Well, as an undergrad, I had a teacher whose class I did not finish because we didn't get along. But I learned then never take a class from a brand new professor. That someone else would anyway. And I wish she had known how much I loved that class. And one of it was an African American literature course. And I tell people I grew up in a time where you couldn't find African American literature. And people think all of a sudden, that's not true, but you couldn't find literature in your elementary school because nobody had written it. It wasn't purchased. And my job as a library media specialist is to make sure I buy enough literature so that whoever comes in the library media center can find themselves in a book. Well, I don't know how I got to this part. Anyway, how did I get to this part? I forget what I said before.
Well, that helped us kind of see your path.
Right. So when I came to Indianapolis, they had a gentleman who was working on his doctorate, and he was in South Bend. He used to go out and tell stories. So he left to go to Colorado, and my boss, people kept calling the office looking for somebody to teach teachers how to tell stories. So I don't know what made me say to my boss, "Oh, I can do that." And so I did. what happened is people then wanted, you told stories to adults, they wanted you to tell stories to their kids. And so I couldn't leave my job and go tell stories, but I would take my personal days and go do storytelling until somebody sent a letter to then Superintendent Harold H. Negley. Well, she's getting paid by the state. How can she charge people for telling stories? And my boss said to me, you in trouble, you in big trouble, you know. So I just went home. Anyway, she was kind enough to write the letter back to the lady for the superintendent to let her know how I could go out and tell stories. Anyway, I have never really advertised the stories other than putting myself in directories from Storytelling Arts. What I do is word of mouth. So now I'm telling stories to the grandkids of the students that I had. And it's just really humbling when they're in your audience. But I started out making a film strip. Y'all know what a film strip is? In graduate school. And it was, I made puppets, I had little props, and you had to take a frame at a time. And I still have the little tube of film strip that I used. And it was the real story of the Three Little Pigs.
Oh, yeah.
So I found out that my forte was taking standard folk tales and urbanizing them, I guess. Because I would tell the story of the Three Little Pigs, which I invite anybody to tell. Because I try to change the story according to wherever I am. Because I know you've heard the story hundreds and hundreds of times before, but what you heard was not correct. So I want you to listen very carefully. I want you to go home and tell your mother, your father, sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, whoever you can. Sit on them and tell them the story. Because this is the real story of the Three Little Pigs. Now, once upon a time, there were three little pigs. Ralph, Ruby, and Seymour. These little pigs were orphans, as their mother had been made into a football. And their father had been made into some Jimmy Dean sausage. So these pigs did not want to end up like their mother and father, so they decided to run away from home. Ralph took the north route along a superhighway, where pretty soon he came upon a broken down junk truck that had just left the paper drive at North Central High School. He asked that junk dealer if he could have those newspapers to build himself a house, and he said yes, and he built the cutest house out of newspaper he ever wanted to see. Well, as soon as he hung the door and had gone inside to rest, who do you think knocked at the door?
Could be the wolf.
The wolf. Little pig, let me in, let me in. No, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. And I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll your house. Now Ralph just laughed, but that wolf huffed and puffed and blew that house in, blew Ralph over the next hill. Now before that wolf could take one step after his dinner, who should show up but the police, and arrested that wolf for littering. That wolf was so mad, he went looking for his dinner all over again. Now Seymour had taken the southern route along another superhighway, and he came upon this huge vacant lot full of tin cans. There were Coca-Cola cans, Campbell soup cans, Pepsi-Cola cans, every kind of can you could possibly name. He asked the owner of that lot if he could have those cans to build himself a house, and he said yes. And he built the cutest house out of tin cans you ever wanted to see. His brother, Ralph, came up and helped them build the chimney. And as soon as they went inside to rest, who do you think knocked at the door?
Could be the wolf again.
You got it, the wolf. Little pig, let me in, let me in. No, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in. Now Ralph and Seymour just laughed because everybody knows tin is stronger than newspaper. But that wolf huffed and puffed and huffed and puffed and blew that house in, blew Ralph and Seymour over the next hill. Now, before that wolf could take one step after his dinner, the police was there again. This time his fine was $300, and that wolf was so mad he went looking for those pigs all over again. Now, Ruby, she was a sensible little pig. She had taken the route through the center of the city through an area that had undergone what they call urban renewal. So there are all these bricks laying around. She'd seen her father lay brick around the pig pen before he was taken away. So she built the cutest house out of bricks you ever wanted to see. There was a huge chimney and fireplace on one side, great big picture windows, double front doors. No sooner had she hung the pictures of her mother and father on the wall, who should come running down the path screaming bloody murder, but Ralph and Seymour hollering that the wolf was coming. Well, she took him inside, gave him a cup of hot chocolate, but before they could raise it to their lips, who do you think knocked at the door?
The wolf.
You got the wolf. Lord Peg, let me in. No, not by the hair of my false eyelashes. Been all huff, been all puff, been all the house in. Now Ruby just laughed. She knew that wolf couldn't blow her house in. But that wolf huffed and puffed, and he huffed and puffed, and he huffed, and he still couldn't blow that house in. Well, then he got an idea, and he said to Ruby, how'd you like some nice, ripe, juicy red apples? She said, I love apples. He told her he'd pick her up at 11 o'clock the next day, take her up to Kroger's, buy her all the apples she wanted. The very next day, she got up at 9 o'clock, went on over to Kroger's, bought all the apples she wanted, came home, peeled them, cut them up, put them in a pot, and was making an apple pie when the wolf arrived. Now, when the wolf smelled those apples cooking, he knew he'd been tricked. He was so mad he saw red. He ran around the house, climbed up the house, tiptoed across the roof, and slid down the chimney. Now, Ruby was fixing breakfast for her brothers. She had a huge pot of hot water on the stove for some oatmeal. When the wolf slid down the chimney, landed in the pot of hot water, and made a mess over her kitchen floor. That made Ruby mad. She grabbed the wolf by his ear and made him clean up the mess. Then he fixed breakfast for all three of them. I want you to know that Ralph, Ruby, Seymour, and the wolf are all living happily ever after, and that is a real story of the three little pigs.
Yeah.
That's great.
Love it. Absolutely love it.
I like the prologue. That
Yeah.